Tony, we're in incredible times, actually, and I think you have mentioned previously the trinity of Brexit, COVID, and the transition to net zero present both clearly some challenges, but also some enormous opportunities for the country, and actually perhaps a sort of once in a lifetime opportunity for us to set down those foundations for future generations. Certainly, we are very focused on helping Britain achieve that transition journey to 2050 in terms of net zero. But I guess just to sort of kick it off, really interested in how you would frame the key elements of the task ahead for businesses as we transition to that net zero target in 2050.
Something has happened, and I can't quite pinpoint when and how, but we've just passed. We've crossed the chasm, and this stuff is now the metabolic rate of sort of green transformation has gone up massively. The level of investment firms are making and governments are making has gone up drastically. I think it's almost happened sort of over the course of the pandemic, so we haven't seen it, but we come out the other side of the pandemic, and I think everybody is going right, full steam ahead. The investment levels the country needs to make now have gone from something like, we need to move from 10 billion a year in decarbonization investment and technology to 50 or 60 billion pounds a year. And we need to start doing that over the next decade. And I think the thing, when I speak to CBI members and businesses, the thing that's really changed is this has become a competitive opportunity. So it's a risk, right? So if you haven't got a decarbonization strategy, a net zero strategy for your own business, then that's a risk to be managed. But actually, people are already thinking about it as a competitive opportunity. And actually, moving fast, first mover advantage gives me a competitive edge. And I think that's the thing that's really changed in the last few years. I sometimes say we're now in a race to the top on net zero. Does that resonate with you in your client conversations?
Tony, look, absolutely. I mean, just you mentioned about the sort of increase in investment. Just from a financing perspective, for example, an 80% increase year on year in terms of sustainability-linked financings from our client base, and that's only going to grow. And I think the other big thing for me is that it goes across all sectors of the economy. So no one is immune from this, and there are different challenges clearly in different sectors, and we're trying to lean into that from sort of agriculture at one end, even just trying to establish what is the carbon footprint of farming, right through to the big energy companies clearly and their transition as they move from fossil fuels and need to finance that renewable energy stream as well. But I can't think of any client conversations that we have now that do not have an ESG element to it. And in actual fact, probably the bulk of the conversations are dominated by that ESG agenda as well.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I mean, I was with a group of CEOs the other day talking about this, and I asked the question, is there money in this stuff? Is this something we have to do, we're forced to do, or it's the right thing to do? It's a moral discussion, not a money discussion. And one French CEO of a construction company said, the cost of not doing this is more expensive than the cost of doing it. And that on a straightforward ROI point of view, whether or not you're in supply chains that are going to be shifting, there's somebody else in the value chain that's now this is going to be the expectation. It's the price of entry now, Scott. And that's, I think, the main economic case, which is you will be unable to participate in the value chain around you, whatever sector you're in, if you're not on this journey. And the best firms are thinking about, actually, if I lead this journey, then there's competitive opportunity. And interestingly, Scott, I think, we're working on a sort of economic vision for the UK. And one of the big benefits for the whole country of making this transition is that actually Britain can become a major exporter of green products, services, and know-how. So what I'm hoping is that, the investments that your clients and customers make now, even if it's not in the investment case, actually they'll see export opportunity grow. Because the hope is, and this is why it's great that Britain's hosting COP, the hope is if Britain genuinely leads as an economy on this, there'll be really rich export opportunities, products or services in the decade ahead.
Tony, I completely echo that. If you take one example, the renewables in terms of wind farms, I think we are already leading that from both a deployment, in terms of how much we're generating for the grid, but also in terms of the technology. And that's not only putting in place the actual capital equipment, but also the servicing elements of it and learning from that. And you're right, absolutely can be an export for the country as we think about, for example, the big programs that are going to go under the new president in the US at the moment. I think just picking up, Tony, on one of your points in terms of, there's a moral, clearly the right thing to do for the environment, but the business case. The built environment is about 40% of carbon emissions at the moment in the UK, and we're very focused on that. There's been lots of studies that suggest as we retrofit, literally millions and millions of buildings and homes, for every pound invested, there's about £3 of benefit, and that's from energy consumption, savings of energy consumption, clearly healthier in terms of well-being and living, but also the creation of jobs as well. And one stat I saw, which was very interesting, that we could create up to 500,000 jobs, a sort of retrofit army in terms of that built environment across the UK.
Yeah, I mean, what's happening here is you've got the potential for let me get the number of them right, a win-win-win-win. Yeah, you normally do 2 or 3, but I think there's a 4 wins story here, which is decarbonisation, good for British business. You've got a job creation, good for British business. You've got levelling up, because you just mentioned offshore wind, right? That's not happening in, it's pretty windy from time to time walking along the Thames of an evening, but that's not a story about the Southeast. And you've got export success. So I think that's why the Prime Minister, and I've spoken to him about this, why the Prime Minister, I think, is a big believer that this agenda is a sort of 4 for 1. And I share that view from the CBI. I really think that the country needs to get behind this. And, if any of your clients or customers are watching this, again, this isn't, I'm not trying to sort of give you a moral imperative. I'm trying to give you a business imperative, because it is coming your way. And actually, I know from talking to businesses every week that everybody is now racing ahead. So, if you're not on the journey, get started. Absolutely.
And I think that linkage, as you mentioned about levelling up or regional regeneration, we're very keen to partner, for example, with the new UK Infrastructure Bank, where clearly there's a big component there in terms of journey to net zero and carbon neutral investments, but also that sort of regional investment as well. So, and look, from a client perspective, we can do a bunch of things, but the core for us is about deployment and direction of capital to companies as they transition, but also in providing products and solutions to try and help them as well. I think from our perspective, there is a big focus in both supporting clients on that transition, but it's also giving them advice and support around some of the questions, scope 1, 2, and how do they calculate scope 3, for example. So it's both funding, but it's also about advice and sort of being by their side as they work through some of those tough questions. Just to sort of wrap up, really, perhaps a final comment from you. Sort of reasons to be optimistic in the journey ahead. We've talked about some of them, but what would you bring it down to in terms of some key points, just in terms of that optimism that we as a nation and businesses can deliver on this agenda?
Yeah, look, I think you've now got the pieces in place aligning that make this momentum unstoppable, right? Government policy is optimizing for this agenda. The City of London, as you say, the finance community is optimizing for this agenda. Employees and customers are expecting progress on this agenda. And I think businesses are now going to look, left and right, up and down to their supply chains, and they're going to see this agenda. So there's no turning back. There's only going forward. There's a little bit of competitive pressure to go forward as quickly and to embrace it as fully as you can, because then the fastest will win. So I'm really optimistic about Britain's decarbonisation story. And I think, just stepping back for a second, I think it's an area where we can genuinely lead in the world. And after everything that's happened in the last few years, I think it's really exciting to be talking about, playing offense rather than defense, and winning prizes for society, for every firm, and for the country as a whole.
Absolutely. Super summary. I completely echo that. Tony, I really want to thank you for your time. Great conversation. Thank you.